So today we're going to talk about the evidence of evolution. So we're continuing our journey through the different parts of evolution. So evolution is based on several different things. We look at fossil records, we look at anatomy of the different organisms when we're comparing them. We look at embryology, which is how do they develop in an egg or how do they develop within their process of growing from one single cell to a multi-cell organism in some cases. They look at their biochemistry, and we look at evidence in microevolution. There's two types of evolution. There's microevolution and macroevolution. Macroevolution is evolution or changes on a large scale, and microevolution are changes in a smaller environment or a smaller situation. So evidence, fossils basically show us what things in the past look like. So it shows us sort of some ancient life forms. They're arranged according to age, and the law of superposition is basically states that a layer of rock is older than the layer above it. So the fossils can be arranged by relevant age if you find them within a particular layer of soil. Radioactive dating is another way that they will basically determine how old a fossil is, and that's by taking things that naturally occur in radioactive substances and decay them, and then you know that rate, and so you can compare it and see how old they are based on how much decay has taken place. Transitional forms of fossils are evidence for evolutionary change, like the bottom organism there that's called Archaeopteryx, and Archaeopteryx is sort of a cross between a bird and a reptile. So here you can see the different layers of Earth. If you go out west, they have huge rocks that look like this, and they have different layer structures forms in them. And you can actually see some of the fossils within some of the layers at times, depending upon how layers weather away. So here is the evolution of a horse. In the old days, when the horses originated, they basically were very, very small. The first horse was between 0 and 4 meters, or 0.4 meters, sorry. So they were not very large. Then you can see that today they have 1.6 meters. So you can see how over time the horses have evolved. On the right-hand side, you can see their teeth and how they've evolved. And then in the middle, you can see their feet and how they have fused into the hooves that we see today when they originally were not hoofed animals. So anatomy evidence, this is basically where you have pre-existing structures that are modified. We call the structures that we're comparing, if they're the same even within different organisms, we call them homologous structures. So these are parts came from the same origin, but they have different functions. So example, like your forelimbs of all mammals contain the same pattern of bones. And although the bones now carry out a variety of functions, they still have that one bone, two bone type situation. So, like a horse's leg, a bat wing, a human arm, and a well flipper all have this. And so you can see it here. See on the cat, you have your one bone, two bones, and then you have your what we call phalanges on us, but you have your different like toes and fingers. Same structure here, one bone, two bones, and then your multi bones that branch out into your limbs. And here's the bats, and here is the gorillas. So you can see that they're very similar with the structure, but they have different functions. And then you also have analogous structures, and these are where they come from different origins, but they have the same function. So if you look at a bird's wings and you look at a dragonfly's wings, they're completely built differently, and they're made out of different cell structures, but they both have the ability to fly. Vestigial structures are something else that we look at, and these are parts that have no function. They must have had a function in our ancestry at some point, but they don't have a function today. So in humans, it's wisdom teeth, your erector pili, your coccyx, which is your tailbone, your ear muscles, and your appendix. So here you can see that a salamander, you have your hind legs, And then a baleen whale, you have little, they used to have legs, so you have little leg structures that are attached to them. And then the boa constrictor also has little appendages that were once legs and are now no more. Embryological evidence, this is when we study the embryos and we just look at the different stages of the embryos and determine how similar these organisms are, how they basically, did they have a common ancestor or did they not? So if you look closely, related organisms develop similarly. And so this suggests that these organisms are related. Mammal embryos, including humans, have fish like gills, slits, and tails when they're in the womb. And so these are sort of interesting to look at. The first one is a sea lamprey, the next one is a pond turtle, then you have your chicken, then you have your cat, and then you have your human. So a lot of these structures look very similar. Um, as they're developing, they do change and have differences, but right now they look similar. So you can see the different structures and how they eventually um, turn into things that we recognize and are not as similar to each other. Biochemistry evidence, this is where you're looking at your amino acids in particular. So all organisms use ATP for energy. Your codes or proteins basically are built from amino acids, and your plasma membranes consist of phospholipid bilayers. So we compare those. We take the number of amino acid differences between human hemoglobin and other organisms, and then based on how many of those amino acids are, how small the number is between them, that means they're more closely related. So you can see how closely related things are on this picture. This is another way that we can show closeness of relationships. These are chromosomes, and they basically are showing you the sequence of amino acids with the different genes that you see on the chromosomes. And then you can compare those amino acids, and the closer they are related, the more of the amino acids they'll have the same. And in the chromosomes, you can compare the genes and you can see how they are related. So the H stands for humans and the C stands for chimpanzee. So you can see how closely they're related by the way that they look. Evidence for microevolution. Oops. So here are the chromosomes with the gene conferring resistance to insecticides. So what has happened in this particular thing is that these organisms, these little bugs, have become resistant to the pesticides that they're putting on the crops. And so as long as they're not resistant to it, you can kill them. But once you find a couple that have the resistance and they mate, they're going to pass on that resistance. And then you're going to have the same situation that you had to begin with, and you're going to have to find another pesticide that can basically kill that particular little bug. So here are just some different graphs showing some different resistant processes. So here is bacteria. This is a bunch of bacteria, includes a resistant variant. They get bathed in antibiotics. Most of the bacteria die, but your little resistance guy does not. The resistant bacteria multiplies and becomes more common, and then the entire infection evolves into a resistant strain. Macroevolution, this is a large scale evolution that takes place over a long period of time, and it can either create a new species or it can eliminate a new species. So here it's showing that you have an orange ancestor at the bottom, and then it branches off into a yellow and still an orange, and then the orange eventually turns to a red, and the yellow turns to a brighter yellow as evolution takes place. Microevolution takes place in short time scales, basically generation to generation, and it can change the genotypes and phenotypes of a population.